We are back for the second episode of Past.Present.Future. I'm Griffin, your host. Thanks for clicking that link and giving us a chance. This is a new comics recommendation and discussion podcast where I sit down with a guest and we talk about our favorite books from the past, the present, and the future. We get to share what we love with each other and you at home. My guest this episode is my pal and the host of On the Digital Soapbox with Soapbox Jay. Available wherever you get your podcasts. It's Soapbox Jay.
Yo, what's going on, Griff?
Hey.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I've been looking forward to this.
I've really appreciated that we've gotten to become friends through the course of the things that we love, talking like this. It's nice to long form be able to look at some books we both love today. So I'm pretty hype about this episode. Do you want to give a quick rundown on your podcast and then we'll jump into some comics?
Oh, yeah. My podcast is called On the Digital Soapbox with Soapbox Jay, and I'm the host, Soapbox Jay. I'm into video games. I used to talk comics, but I kind of pushed that to the side to other people who are better equipped, like Griffin and a couple other people who are doing this stuff. Video games are my wheelhouse. I pay very close attention to the industry. It's basically a quasi-political take on the industry as a whole and how we can, as consumers, how we can better the industry and push it to be better. I'm on Spotify and wherever podcasts are available, Apple, iTunes podcasts, whatever they call that. Also on Twitter, on a soapbox with 3 X's, not a porn reference, I swear. But yeah, follow me. I talk my shit. It's fun.
You do talk your shit. And I always appreciate your perspective. So I encourage anyone watching this to check you out. Let's start off by talking a little bit about what got you into comics and where does that love for the medium come from for you?
Well, I'm a little bit older. I'm in my mid-40s right now. I'm aging myself. So what's it called? I remember when I was younger, my father used to bring me to the barber shop. Yeah, we're taking this back. And the magazine rack before smartphones.
Oh.
Yeah. The dude had Alan Moore's Swamp Things sitting there. And I picked up the issue. I don't remember which one it was because I was young, because I had to be less than 10 years old. But Swamp Thing looked cool as hell to me to my 10-year-old brain. I was like, this is amazing. Maybe not even 10, maybe more like 8. And when it was time to leave the barbershop, I wanted to let me take the book with me because he saw I liked it so much. And that was what kind of spawned my love for comics. You know, I asked my father, can we buy more of these? And then he took me to a supermarket because there was no comic book stores back then. And, X-Men, Spider-Man, just the stuff like that I gravitated towards. Batman, obviously, DC and Marvel. There was really not a huge indie scene at the time. But I really didn't completely get it, especially Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is some mature shit. It really gets deep. And I've just read it recently, and the whole Alan Moore run. I just finished it. And I don't know what I thought this was as a kid, but it's a great run. Now that I understand where he's coming from with it. But yeah, I gravitated towards those books in the 80s. Then remember Marvel cards?
Yeah. I had a great Marvel card collection in the 90s.
Yeah, and it pulled me back in. And I gravitated towards the supernatural stuff. And then I fell off again. And I got back into it when they added, when I got an iPad, a tablet, and I wanted to re-submerge myself in the comic book culture back in, I want to say maybe 2009, 2010. And I read Sweet Tooth and a couple other books, one of the books that I'll be talking about today from my past, and just have not let go since. It's such a beautiful, immersive art form, in my opinion, that the creators do not get the respect that they deserve for a multi-billion-dollar industry that they've crafted.
Facts.
And, while I'm not going to lie, if you've heard my stuff on my podcast, I'm a fan of the Marvel stuff, the movies, the shows, and stuff like that. And some of the DC stuff, I'm a little critical with them, but I think they've earned that reputation. But it's my childhood brought into form as an adult, where you're realizing the complexities of some of these characters and the layers of some of these characters 20 to 30 years later that's still there. And
it's true.
I will not. Yeah, I'll be reading this stuff. I'm years behind with when it comes to the mainstream stuff. With the indie stuff, I take your recommendations a lot, and I start reading a lot of things because, like, honestly, I am like a stan for you. Like, you have put me onto so much shit, and I can't stop gushing about you and this show. I think this is awesome that you're doing this. I think your voice is honestly something that needs to be out there in the comic book recommendation world. You are one of the best that do it, and I'm not just gassing you. I mean that.
I handle compliments super poorly, so I am turning incredibly red. But thank you. That's really nice of you, bud.
It is all earned and deserved, in my opinion. I'm not just saying this because we're cool. This is how I discovered you, you know?
It's a real treat to sit down and talk comics. What past book has your attention? What book do you want to talk about today?
The book that I want to talk about is one of the comics alongside Sweet Tooth that got me back into the fold of comics, which is We Three, which came out in 2004 Vertigo DC run. It's written by Grant Morrison and Frank Quietly, and it is an easy, quick, super quick read, 3 issues long. And I love the story for multiple reasons. It's just, there's so many ways that you can take this. You can enjoy it on a level of face value. It's cool to see, the thing. Let me get into the story. I'm just getting ahead of myself. It's a social commentary on the military industrial complex and the way America treats its and disposes of its veterans. It speaks on the far-reaching, abusive influence that the military seems to have on corrupting even the most innocent of creatures. So there's these 3 animals that are in robotic suits of armor that the military is repurposing to do like hits. And they're not necessarily ferocious animals either. They're just like a dog, like a golden retriever, I think it is, a house cat, and a rabbit. Bandit, Tinker, and Pirate. And the only reason you know these animals' names is because of the covers of each issue shows the missing poster of these animals.
Oof.
Which is way more hard hitting than showing somebody talking about a missing animal. It's just like they were abducted, it seems like. So when they're repurposed, they were repurposing. They come from really highly personal names like Pirate because the rabbit has a patch over its eye, and they're renamed 1, 2, and 3 because it's not an identity anymore. It's just a number. You're a cog in the machine. It's a story that can be enjoyed on multiple levels. At face value, it's cool to see some of the animals flip out in these really interesting fight scenes, but it also it covers multiple layers of different aspects, and it really starts to hit hard. I don't want to give too much away. But the animals go rogue at one point because they're supposed to be disposed of because they've accomplished their mission as the test. So let's move on to other things. And first off, this is the precursor. This is the team. The team worked together for All-Star Superman, which is also a great book. But this came out a couple years before it. So if you were a fan of that book, I implore you to check this out. And even though it ends on a very somber, it's kind of hopeful. And the amount of empathy that you have for these 3, even with a limited vocabulary, the way these animals talk, it's not like, good boy, I did good, that's it, ill, humans, stinky, that's it. That's pretty much how the animals talk to one another. It's very childlike, and I've read this book so many times, and like I said, it's a really quick read, 20 to 30 minutes. You can just digest the entire series, and I think that this is one of the most powerful comics that I've read that really covers, it really covers how fucked up the military industry could be and how governments just try to cover things up. And it speaks volumes about how we treat our soldiers. It speaks volumes how we treat our people and our community as a whole.
It's really incredible. I read this for the first time, I think this year. I had been put off because the concept of animal soldiers didn't sell me, but it's Morrison, and because it's Morrison, they use these innocent characters in such an effective way to convey these themes, and it's everything you said. And when I finally gave it a chance, it's kind of incredible what they do with these like non-traditional protagonists, uh and the amount of emotion and feeling they're able to put into the protagonist while just using such simple dialogue. It's a really fantastic book. Quietly's art in it is really cool. There's a lot of really cool like little paneling for effect, uh some really cool layouts.
The colors just pop too.
It's a great looking, and the fact that it's so short, it always impressed. Like it impresses me because of the amount that's conveyed in 3 issues. I've been thinking a lot lately about like the way American comics and the state of the ongoing medium kind of affects storytelling, and it's such a hard contrast to see what Morrison does in 3 issues here.
Like, absolutely. Morrison is a masterclass at their skill. This was my introduction to them, and I've read other stuff that Morrison has put out in the past, and this is what made me such a big fan of the work, you know? So yeah, it's Morrison always has a very weird way of writing at times.
Yeah.
And I'm a closet edgelord, and I love the weird take that's put on page at times. So it's not a problem to me. I eat that shit up. But this book, it just holds a special place in my heart, and I don't know on how they could have conveyed the message any better than on paper like that.
It's one of those stories that it's comics, you know. You could do it as a show, you could do it as a movie, but you wouldn't get the paneling and the effect, and the pacing is just so comics. And that's another thing that I took away from it.
If you haven't read it, read it. Go buy it. Please. It's great.
Two emphatic recommendations here. The book that I'm going to talk about from the past is The Unwritten. This is a Vertigo book from 2010, 2009, somewhere in there. Do you remember Vertigo? It was the mature DC imprint that gave us some of the greatest comics published from the mid-90s to the early aughts. All-time classics like Preacher, 100 Bullets, Why the Last Man, The Invisibles, Hellblazer, Sandman. The list goes on. And even through their slow decline in the late 2000s, they had books like Fables and DMZ. But today I want to talk about one of the last great original Vertigo epics, The Unwritten. Brought to us by Mike Carey and Peter Gross, the collaborative team that brought us another successful Vertigo series, Lucifer. This 54-issue series plays with concepts I tend to be drawn to. It is, for example, an examination of celebrity culture and the lionization from fans. Most importantly, though, it examines the concept of stories as idea forms, pure and real creations of psychic belief. It's metafiction to a level very rarely seen, a love letter to the history of story and the form itself, relishing in playing off and steeping itself in tropes, but with narrative purpose and thematic relevance. This is at its core a story about the lasting power of stories and the mark they make on humanity, perhaps the only true magic we have as a society. Carey achieves this in 2 ways. First, by mirroring Harry Potter and supposing the child was based on a real person. We see Tom Taylor, the man, held up against Tommy Taylor, the storybook character his father created, and the way the fictional world brushes up against and overlaps with Tom becomes the focal point for a mystery conspiracy that takes us across the globe and beyond. Even as The Unwritten becomes more and more fantastical, Carey heavily leans on real-world history of famous and lasting stories. Locations, names, sequences of events. This is well-researched historical fiction as much as it is a story about a magical child searching for answers and purpose. Peter Gross's art fits this perfectly, somewhere between storybook illustrations and horror art, with a palette that matches that storybook feel and makes some of the more intense moments hit all the harder. This is a series I've come back to over the years and find more layers and care in its construction each time. One criticism I do have, you should plan to give this around 10 issues to grab you. It's a little slow in giving up its world and its intent, but the destination is worth the journey, in my opinion. If you've enjoyed recently Kieran Gillen's Once and Future, or to bring Morrison back, Morrison's Animal Man, specifically the way Morrison muses on story in that, I think you'll find a lot to enjoy here in the Unwritten.
Yeah, the book, I've just started reading it, and we spoke a little bit about this before we recorded it, and I was curious about it. The way you explained it sounded really interesting, and yeah, the parallel with Harry Potter is really apparent. And yeah, I'm only a couple issues in. It is taking a little bit to get started, but I'm invested at this time. The characters are very well written.
I find, especially the first 5 issues, are more focused on establishing the Tom Taylor character, which I always think is funny because I picture all of this happening to the comic writer Tom Taylor. And he's just fallen out of the story about a story into the real world, and now he writes great comics. But so they spend the first 5 or 6 issues really establishing Tom Taylor's place in the world and the way that his existence is interacting with the greater consciousness of the fandom, and that becomes sort of the building blocks the rest of the world gets built on. So I get why they had to do that, but it is really slow to give up some of its cooler bits, and it doesn't become apparent where it's going at all for like 10 to 15 issues, which I get that's not some people's thing, but it's worth it. It gets so good. It's so big. It touches on world literary history in so many interesting ways, and it has something to say about the relationship of story to storyteller to consumer that I really think is special.
That really gets me hyped to get further into the series now.
Get further into it, man.
I'm
cool.
Working on it. Yeah, it is a great, it's so interesting right now. Like you're saying, the first couple issues are kind of explaining the character and celebrity culture and just the fandom that follows it, that almost to a ridiculous extent. And I appreciated that, like especially in the second issue. So, but like you're saying that historically accurate, and all these other things get brought into the fold after the 15th issue. Yeah, so like I'm hyped to get there.
Stories about stories are super cool. I have such a nerd like hard on for thinking about the way process and the interaction, the symbiotic interaction between the person telling the story, the person receiving the story, and like the nature of story. And this book just hits that sweet spot so well for me. But
it seems very meta.
It's super meta. Just I go crazy for that stuff. I'm a big dork. We are going to move into the now, Jay. From what I understand, you want to talk about a book I'm also in love with right now.
Yeah, we're in the present now.
This is the present.
We're living in the right now. The book that has me really invested from the get is The Me That You Love in the Dark. It's an image book written by Scotty Young, who did Deadpool and Strange Academy, and Jorge Corona. Am I reading that right? Yeah, Corona, I'm sorry, who did the illustration for Super Sons. His artwork is awesome. I love the edges. I love the lines. I love how like the hard colors that it does. This book is almost reminiscent of a young, more reserved, but Sam Keith, I'm going to say.
Okay.
Kind of get that vibe from it. So in the description, this is what kind of pulled me in. It says for fans of Stephen King and Neil Gaiman. And I was like, oh, well, that seems dope. I'm already there, you know. As of time of recording, we're 3 issues deep. And again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. Layers to this title is something that appears simple at first, but it has the potential to transform into something extremely deep. Things are happening that can be taken for face value, but that might not be the case. The perception, it kind of gets into issues of the perception of those that we fancy, the rose-tinted glasses, the mental decline of individuals, pressure to achieve greatness, not once but twice. Or maybe it's just a spooky romance novel in comic form. I can't call it, but I know I like it. It doesn't have too many characters. It just features an artist named Ro Metals, who is trying to capture lightning in a bottle twice and reinvent herself. There's really only two characters, like I said, Ro and the house / entity in the house. The relationship between her and the house is such an innocent one. It's almost like high school romance type stuff. I'm not gonna lie. Um, it's an easy read. It's for those who get like scared of walls of text. There's none of that here. A lot of the story is conveyed through the artwork, which having Corona do it is the best way to go about this. He's very expressive in his work. And the second issue, it kind of leaves you in a weird place. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to straight up talk about this stuff if you don't, so you can go for it.
Like I said earlier, the perception of those that we fancy, that we seem to overlook what could be considered flaws.
That very end of issue 2, you mean? That's a great way to look at that panel. I like that a lot.
It's the way she sees this thing and the way this thing actually looks are two separate things. It's not there. It's not what she sees is not really there. But it's not, I don't know. It's like, again, it seems like it could be taken from multiple angles. Is this a mental decline? Is this her projecting? I don't know. It's written extremely ambiguous. Like, is she like a misanthrope? Maybe she just doesn't like people around, and she's created this obsession with isolation that you just want to be left alone, which I can relate to at times. You know what I'm saying? So it's such a well conveyed book. It's not like heavily written and heavy handed. And the words of the entity at the end of issue 2, it says, "I believe you may have found something, and it's beautiful." And I think that describes the book as a whole.
You have such a different read on the story than I do.
Really?
And I love that. Yeah. I assume such a more nefarious intent than you are. I think that on the surface, it's being presented as this sort of sweet thing. But I took that last panel on issue 2 to be either a lack of ability to perceive horror or an intentional obscuring of one's real identity. I'm reading this like it's an incredibly toxic relationship where this entity is slowly manipulating this human into falling in love with it and isn't willing to let it go, let her go. Especially with the introduction of that room in issue 3.
Mm-hmm.
There's a setup where there's no longer a reason where she would need to leave the house.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like the entity isn't going to want to let her go back to her life at the end of this. That's where I think this is headed.
Yeah, in the third issue, it's like it's left very ambiguous about what this entity's intentions are, and it could go into a direction that is that is malicious, and the relationship could ultimately be toxic. But it hasn't displayed any of those besides making her a little reliant on him. But I think, I don't know. It's.
I think that's the point, though. I think the ambiguity and the subtle inching of this manipulative nature, I think that's the point of the story at this point. I think that we're not supposed to know how to feel as this entity inches itself into this realm more and more. I think that we're supposed to feel like it could be benign, and we're supposed to overlook some warning signs. And then I think maybe in the future we're gonna see some more hard red flags.
Yeah, it's this book will be done in December. I'm so curious on how this thing ends. It's such a beautifully crafted masterpiece, in my opinion, and
I'm with you. Everything you said about the art is spot on. The way that the story is conveyed visually with a very, very light amount of text, very just kind of pointed dialogue in a very good interpersonal way, but not a whole lot of narration, not a whole lot of background. We know just enough. We don't have a ton of world building, but we don't need it. That's not the story. And I think that the art conveys the emotion super, super well, like you said.
It's the book that I run to every Wednesday when it comes out, and it's the first thing I do that day.
It was top of my pile for issue 3 too.
Yeah.
So Scotty Young is someone I only know really for his alternate covers.
Likewise, he's done a couple other books. He has a very playful, innocent style. That's like the Little Avengers, Little X-Men, which are not great books in my opinion. I'm not trying to punch down on this at all, but I think that the artwork, yeah, the artwork is always great though. I've flipped through a couple of the books and his art is amazing. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with him writing.
I've heard good things about Middleland, so that's like on my list to check out.
Oh, and then this is by him. So then, yeah, after this is done, just definitely be checking that out.
That's sort of where I'm at too. Is that's my next Scotty Young foray. And Strange Academy has been really good, which is also Scotty Young over at Marvel. That's probably the Marvel book going under the radar the most right now. So shout outs to Scotty Young on those two things.
Shouts, yeah. I'm a fan of what you're doing right now. Honestly, it's great.
Closing thoughts?
I'm just gonna leave it up to mystery, like the book is right now. It's so well executed, and again, you don't have to necessarily be like a romance person to really get into this. I feel like, or like Griff was saying, maybe it's a toxic relationship book. We don't know yet. I would love to talk about this later.
Yeah, we got to revisit this for sure when it's done. Do a little mini episode. I'm definitely down for that, bud.
Yeah, I'm definitely down.
My present book, one of my favorite books coming out at the moment. Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips' Image book, That Texas Blood, is a crime comic tinged with the occult that deserves a look. It's set in fictional Ambrose County, Texas. This book pushes in an inexorable pace, driving you slowly but purposefully into its small town characters and history. What makes this book special? Well, Condon's a master in setting and characterization. I've heard this described as slow burn, and it is, but the book has a definable rhythm, a pull that sucks you in and holds you tight to the last page. Usually a well-stylized bit of back matter, fleshing out some story beats and hinting at future developments. This is Jacob Phillips' first ongoing as artist, known best previously for his color work alongside father Sean Phillips and legend Ed Brubaker on things like Criminal and Reckless and Cruel Summer. So the pedigree is high, and in style and substance, it lives up to that pedigree, giving us memorable characters, excellent visual storytelling, mystery, and blood. The art is clean and effective with a very cinematic flair to the layouts and a ton of emotion to the characters. Main character Joe Bob is immediately familiar, but also unique. There are not a lot of 70-year-olds starring in comics right now. I love his mannerisms and healthy relationship to his wife. It's not a thing we see a ton in crime comics. The setting, too, feels fully realized and alive. Ambrose County reminds me of cross-country trips with odd stop-offs in quiet towns where everyone knows each other's names and communal history is long. I think fans of No Country for Old Men and Southern Bastards will find a lot to enjoy here.
I was just about to ask you, Old Country for Men. That movie is like, it sounds like that a little bit.
It's definitely more occult than that, especially in this most recent, the current arc. It definitely kind of crosses over more into territory. It's nothing like Fatale, but if you've read Fatale, that kind of amount of supernatural or the hint of that kind of supernatural, nothing, it's all kind of ambiguous still. There's no real supernatural goings on, but there's hints of supernatural goings ons.
All right.
And it's being played kind of as a straight crime book. But it's the setting of Ambrose County that really sets this apart, in my opinion. And what Condon and Phillips do with their limited page counts every month to move this story along at the exact pace they're intending to move it along is something you don't see a ton in the direct market right now. And I'm kind of, it's bold in that way. This is also either first or second every week in my read pile.
Full disclosure, I have not read this book yet. I've seen it and it's piqued my interest. So
let this be your call to action, my friend.
I think I'm going to be checking this out.
The first trade's out for my trade people. It's definitely worth the purchase. The second trade is not out. It's still coming out. So it's only one trade in. It's a perfect time to hop on. The second arc is just about to wrap up.
It sounds good. I'm gonna be checking this out.
Let's move into the future then.
We're in the future.
The future.
Flying cars. And
Whoa.
it's great here.
It's great here.
Clean renewable energy. Okay. For my future book, I picked The House of Slaughter. And it's like I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because it's kind of just a new book by title, because it's basically the sequel, not a sequel. It's picking up where something's killing the children somewhere in the storyline. It's really first of all, Something is Killing the Children is great.
Agreed.
It's one of the best books out there, in all honesty. It's on Boom Studios. It's written by James Tynion IV and Tate Bombro and Weather Del. I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher this person's name. Delia, yeah. Okay, so if you've read Something is Killing the Children, which if you haven't, you really need to read Something is Killing the Children.
Go buy Something is Killing the Children.
Go do it. Do it now.
Do it.
We'll be waiting. It gets into a character that was established in the first story arc of that series, Aaron Slaughter, and Aaron and his origins. So it's an interesting choice to pick that character to be the focal point, in my opinion, considering where the story is at right now. It seems like this book is going to get into the internal politics of the House of Slaughter, the monster hunting shadow organization. It's an information dump near the end of the what is it? Something's Killing the Children, episode 20, making the world very way more expansive than the original conflict seemed like it was.
For sure.
They get into like all these tiers and different chapters and houses and stuff like that all over the world. And we've just dealt with an outbreak in a small town so far. The thing I like about this is that this series, Something is Killing the Children, if you take this in combination with The House of Slaughter, it has not exceeded its first story arc yet. It goes back to pivotal moments and explains them more in depth, which I like, because it's like when you're reading through the original story, it's like, okay, I'm understanding this, but then it goes back to a certain point. It explains why this person got involved and that phone call that you didn't hear, how it actually went down, and what this shadow organization, what kind of powers they actually have. And it drops these tidbits of knowledge throughout the thing, and it fleshes the story out even more so. And it says that Something is Killing the Children is coming back, and I take it this will be the beginning of the second story arc. So like I'm just curious about where they're going to take this with Aaron Slaughter, if he's going to remain the main character and if it's going to get into it, because it gets into the character didn't seem too interesting when they first announced him, when he first came into the scene. It was like, okay, I'm curious on what this character is, capable of. And then it just kind of ends and you're kind of just like, all right, so can we make this character feel like he had more gravity, more impact in the story? And I like how they're going back and doing that. That's a real interesting take, in my opinion.
I'm excited for the world building and expansion. I'm excited to see some of the other houses and maybe how they interact, like the politics, like you said. Mm-hmm. It seems like a really interesting direction to push the world. Instead of pushing forward, we're kind of pushing out.
Yeah. It's like, and Erica Slaughter is a great character, and there's Something Killing the Children, and it's just I'm just really curious on like, they just went through her origin story and explained a lot about her, but like you said, it pushes out where she's no longer the focal point. She's a cog in the machine that not a very cooperative one, but she's a person that in this expansive world where she's just one person. And I like that because they made her seem like so like the center of the story for close to 20 issues. And then we're going to say, her overarching story, even though she is the focal point. There's way more moving parts behind this whole thing.
Do you know when this comes out?
This is coming out at the end of the month. Yeah,
it's very exciting.
October. Yeah.
October is such a busy month. I gotta get another job. Comics.
Yeah.
I want to spotlight Night of the Ghoul, coming to Comixology October 19th from Scott Snyder and Frank Avella. Night of the Ghoul is one of the numerous creator-owned original titles Snyder is bringing to Comixology through his personal imprint, Best Jacket Press. The initiative is launched with an event called Scottober, with 3 books coming in October alone. Clear, a sci-fi noir, We Have Demons, which came out last week, and Night of the Ghoul. All 3 look interesting. Snyder's prolific resume includes things like Batman, DC's Death Metal, Noctera, American Vampire, and Witches, while Frank Avella has worked on tons of Marvel and DC properties, as well as most of the main pulp heroes, and his creator-owned series, The Black Beetle, which I personally enjoyed. Snyder previewed some pages during his Substack comics class recently, and the first pages of Ghoul hooked me in visual style and tone immediately. Ostensibly about the search for a long-lost horror masterpiece from the 30s that might itself be haunted, and in a larger way about film itself, Night of the Ghoul promises to be a slow-burn creature feature filled with tension and build. Snyder's American Vampire is an example of how masterfully he can weave period horror, and I'm so excited to see what he does with this story. Frank Avilla's art is a major draw too. He's a great visual storyteller and conveys so much feeling and tension with his pulpy style. Book has a ton of promise.
Scott Snyder is amazing.
Almost always must read for sure.
Yeah.
Just a great dude too. Love supporting him. Love that this is on Comixology Unlimited from release date. So if you have a Comixology subscription, you already have access to these comics as they come out. And that's just really cool.
Yeah, like I just heard about these other 2 that you were mentioning that Scott Snyder did. I just downloaded We Have Demons. We Have
Demons. Yeah, it's supposed to be really good. It's on my list right now too.
Yeah, and it's the like when I saw the team behind it, I was just like, this is the same team that did the New 52 Batman.
Yeah, Capullo and Snyder, you gotta grab that book.
You have to.
Grab
There's
that
no
book.
way around it. It's like when I saw their names, I was like, oh yeah, and it comes with the subscription. Yeah, sign me up. I want it. So this book is sounding really interesting. Now I'm gonna look into all these stuff because like again, Scott.
They come with a subscription. You have nothing to lose.
Yeah. What do you have to lose besides the couple minutes that it takes to read this book? And if you don't like it, never pick it up again. And I doubt that that's going to be the case because Scott Snyder has not disappointed me at this point.
I won't say that I love all of the things I've read by Snyder, but I will say that I respect the vision and thought he puts into all of his things. Some of them just aren't for me. And that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, I just think
he is fantastic. I would say 9 out of 10 times that's a hit, you know?
Absolutely.
And especially for the price of free. And it's not just the first issue. Each issue is going to release Comixology free, like on release. So
and let's make this clear. Okay. For the price of three books a month is basically going to be the subscription at that point.
It's I think it's the price of what like 1 or 2 issues would cover it. And instead of that, you're going to get all 3 issues each month, and that'll cycle out, and then another 3 books are coming.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited that the spotlight on Comixology Unlimited, especially as a solution to piracy and for people who are low on funds but want to read these stories. I think it's a really, really good resource. So I'm excited to see them making moves for this original content. A parting thank you to all the people watching and talking about these books with us in the comments and messages. Support your local comic shops. Shout out to Comic Relief and Wade's Comic Madness for holding me down every new comic book day. Support the books and creators you love. Thanks to Ray Beats for our intro music. Check out his new song Ghost, available on all streaming platforms. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications on new episodes. I'm going to try to push out 2 a month for now. Jay, tell everyone how they can check out On the Digital Soapbox again, and hit people with your closing thoughts for the episode if you want to.
Yeah, again, On the Digital Soapbox with Soapbox Jay. talk about video games and video game culture and the dirty business behind it. You can find me on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Podcast, Anchor, Overcast, wherever podcasts are available. Just Google me. I'm also on Twitter, as I said, on a soapbox with 3 X's. No pornography, I promise. It is work friendly.
I vouch for that.
Yeah, so please join, interact. It's great. I don't shy away from conversation or controversy, so that's it.
And you can always keep up with me on Twitter at Griffin Talks, where I'm usually posting quick impressions and reviews on weeklies and trades as I get to them. There's a great little community blossoming on our Discord, named to be determined. I like to think of it as a community of collaborators, like a co-op where we all support each other, plug our projects, but also a place to talk nerdy and discover new music and just chill. Link to join in the description. Next episode, I am back with former Honestly Nerds co-host Chris Nolan. Cheers.